Okay, another session. Must say I'm feeling a lot better and fresher today. Been struggling with a cold this last week. And I think the last session I shot at like 11:30 at night. So obviously not the freshest mind. So I'm hoping this will be a bit more, um, I guess, streamlined rather than just entertaining. Um, okay, yeah. So been busy. The last week's been really interesting. But I must say, there was a moment during the week where um, somebody messaged me and they said, you know what, their one unit test just actually caught a mistake that otherwise would have gone unnoticed. And the person that sent me this message is quite the experienced developer. And something clicked, I guess. I think I realized that, well, it was in parallel with another thought, which is that testing is a lot like what I kind of was taught to do at high school level around math question papers. Which was essentially that if I had time left after an exam to actually sit and validate my answers, because if you think about it, when you're solving an algebraic equation, you're essentially solving a missing variable. So you might be solving for x, and ultimately, once you derive x via the various techniques that we had to study and understand, you could take x, put it back into the original algorithm, and see that it still produced the answer that you expected. And this was essentially testing your own work, right? Which is at the heart of automated tests. Is testing is what I'm writing, doing what I expect it to do, and helping yourself pick up when it doesn't. When you maybe thought that you were getting the answer of two, and now you change something, and suddenly you don't get the answer of two. So yeah, it was a interesting thought. And so there was this bit then when this person messaged me and said, the unit test caused something that otherwise would have missed. I think it's made sense to me a bit more because one of the things that I've been struggling with especially with unit tests, not so much feature tests, but unit tests, where I'm just testing whether a function does what I expected it to do given a certain input, is, you know, if that function isn't going to change over the next 2 years in the software, right? We aren't going to refactor it. We aren't going to be changing it. Then that unit test doesn't have a purpose, is really, in my mind, going forward. I mean, if the code was shown to work today, tomorrow, and then finally get released, why would I want to run that unit test over and over again in the preceding months, years during the release cycle? Especially if nothing's changed. And I think that helped me quite a lot because it's not just to pick up that changes might have broken something that previously was working, like regression bugs, because yes, that is the purpose. But it's also to give you a second line of inquiry into your code to offer you a different vantage point as to the algorithm that you're writing. Not just getting it to work, but making sure that it does what it's meant to do, given various criteria, and getting you to think about your algorithm in ways that you don't necessarily do when you're writing it. And so, yeah, that was just some thoughts I wanted to share. It was a little bit of an interesting kind of like mental exercise, but I'm hoping, yeah, maybe it makes sense to somebody else too. But yeah, just some thoughts. But okay, so on to today's exercise. Cool. So we are continuing our Laravel certification prep, delving a bit deeper into collections. So again, we've got these exercises that we're tackling. The aim the express aim is to essentially make sure that you're making use of collections, that you're delving into the helper methods, and familiarizing yourself with some of the deeper knowledge behind collections. Um, we actually had a recent the Laravel Origins premiere was in this last week, and I actually had a good conversation with somebody where I could, I guess, name drop some knowledge I'd encountered during recent prep sessions, and that was that collector helper methods inherently don't mutate the original collection. They will perform the operation and they will return a new collection. But there are a handful that do mutate the original collection, such as transform, which applies a callback to all the values in the collection based on what you write, but it mutates the original collection. Whereas a function like map, which also does the same, it applies a callback to all the values in the collection, but it doesn't mutate the original collection. It just applies the formula or the function to the values, but what is returned by that specific line of code is a new collection, which you then obviously need to assign to a variable or chain or return, depending on what you want to do. So yeah, it was good having that knowledge, talking through it, and I think these are the kind of things that are interesting things to talk. And I think if you want to test somebody's mastery of the subject, these are the kind of things that you'd want to kind of ask. So you'd say something like, what is inherently true for collection helper methods? And you got A, B, C, D, E, and maybe D says collection helper methods do not inherently mutate the original collection. And then you should know that, option C, unless it, obviously explicitly state, as is the case with not map, but I forgot the name of it now, but it'll come to me. It's somewhere in the back of my mind. So looking at today's specific question, we're meant to create a new function, longest name, which takes an array of names and it returns as a string. So it says, given an array of first names, return the longest name by number of characters. Sample data, Bob, Jill, James, and the expected response is James. Okay, awesome. I think what I did the last time that I'd like to not do today is I immediately went to for map when I think there might have actually been a helper method that could have prevented me from writing my own closure that gets applied to all the items in the collection. So I'm going to take this a bit slower today, and I'm going to go through the documents and see if they aren't interesting looking methods which might be able to solve the specific challenge. All right, so test-driven development. We start with tests. We've already got our test class, which we will be just extending because it is still all testing our collection service. And we've got that. So let's just set ourselves up to be able to do the TDD cycle. So PHP artisan test, and we're going to throw in the flag to filter that we only run that test. Oh Lord, look at the spelling. Collection service test. Let that run. Oh, beautiful. Passes. Great. Happiness. We're ready to do this. So we're now set up to red, green, refactor. Okay, awesome. Okay, so public function test, and our method name is going to be longest name. There we go. And we're going to say, so we will be using our helper method that we set up in previous sessions. We will be calling longest name, and we will be passing it an array of names. So we've got Bob, Jill, and James. Bob, Jill, James. Okay, perfect. So let's just say result equals, and then we will do this dot assert equals. So just visually looking at that, I believe we do expect James back. Interesting. It did not say what it should do if the longest name is the same length, but maybe that's overthinking it. So let's have a look at this. So we need to validate that results. Oh, sorry, expected. So expected in this case will be James. And the actual is result. Perfect. Got our test, our initial test set up. Let's run that. Perfect. Call to undefined method. All right, so we need to write the minimum code to get this to pass. Okay, which takes us to a collection service. We're going to have a new function over here. Public, oopsie daisy, function longest names. Is it longest name? Longest name, yes. Longest name. Type int, boom, array, names. Type it the return type, needs to be a string. And we are going to return James. Okay, there we go. Passes, but of course we know we're cheating at the moment. But let's write the next failing test. So we will have, let us just refactor this to be result 1. And then result 2, we'll add another name, which will be, hey, my name, Jonathan. And essentially, we'll write a second assertion, Jonathan, gotcha. It'll be equal to result 2. So I believe that'll be a failing test. Yes, and we've got it, right? Jonathan was expected, James was returned. Okay, minimum code to make this pass. Okay, so we're given an array, but we want to work with collections. So we will be doing names collection equals collect, which is the helper, global helper method that can create a collection based on, amongst other things, an array. Names, okay, beautiful, which means names collection is now names. So now it's off to the docs. Let's do Laravel collections. So again, beautiful documentation at the Laravel origin document premiere. This came up quite a few times. A lot of the people said they got into Laravel because of the beautiful documentation, and having used this quite a lot, I can't agree more. It's fantastic. So at this point, I started going down various rabbit holes. It was quite good. I experimented a bit with the mapping function, with the filter function, with the transform helper. A lot of interesting stuff. Definitely gained some more insight. But ultimately, I think I kind of arrived at the conclusion that I couldn't do it with this single helper method. And also an existing one didn't seem to fit the bill. So my solution, which I then only kind of came up with after I left my machine for a bit and went out and had a eureka moment, I'll show you next. Jumping back in here. So I tried quite a few different approaches. I messed around with the mapping function, with the transform function. Tried using max, Learned a lot, but I think ultimately I couldn't think of a way to, within a single existing helper function, to actually resolve this question. So my solution that I ended up implementing is we've got the collection of names. So I figured, okay, let me get the largest string, or the longest strings actual value, which I do over here. So I'm making use of the map function, which again, like we know now, returns a new collection. It doesn't mutate the existing collection. So on that, I basically convert all the string values to integers, which are the string values lengths, which is in a new collection. And then because we know you, we can chain helper methods off of a collection. Once I've got that, I basically just ask it, you know what, what's the maximum number in this collection? So then I know what the longest number is for the longest string, the most amount of characters. So then, part of the experimentation, I kind of messed around with the filter function. But essentially, the filter function iterates over every single value in the collection and tests a condition. If that condition is true, it's added to the new collection. If it is false, it's omitted. So at this stage, it's quite easy. I just need to confirm that the length of the string is equal to the length of the longest string, because then we know we've got the longest string in the collection. We need to return that. Earlier I mentioned, and I played around with, thought, what if I have two strings of equal length? You know what, it's not specified in the requirements. So I'm just going to select and return the first one. And after having written that code, because we were failing all the way up until this point, there we go. We've got the test passing. So yeah, interesting. I must say, tongue-in-cheek, that it, presented with the problems it did, and it wasn't as clear just to resolve it as it eventually came to be. But I guess that's just testimony for, again, if you get stuck into a problem too deeply, it's good to kind of just get up, clear your space, your mind, and the answer will come to you. Because essentially this came to me after we kind of like left to go have social with family. And yeah, that is it. Thanks for watching.